The truth most people never hear is not gentle. It doesn't arrive with comfort. It arrives like a quiet accusation you can't shake. Here it is. If your life feels stuck, it's not because the world is cruel. It's because the world has already tested you, and you stepped back. That sentence alone will make some people click away. Good. They were never meant to hear what comes next. Because the most dangerous lie is not that success is hard. It's that failure comes from outside you, from systems, from timing, from bad luck, from other people. Those stories feel humane, they feel fair, they feel merciful, and that's exactly why they keep you weak. Let me tell you about a man named Adrian. Adrian is smart, not a genius, but sharp enough. He reads, he watches videos like this. He knows the language of ambition. Every year he tells himself, this is the year I push, and every year something presses back. Not a disaster, not tragedy, just pressure, long hours, slow progress, unclear rewards, the quiet boredom of repetition, the humiliation of being ignored, nothing dramatic enough to justify quitting. Nothing inspiring enough to fuel momentum, so Adrian delays. He tells himself he's being patient, strategic, waiting for the right moment, but patience and avoidance look identical from the outside. Here's the part no one explains. Pressure is not the enemy. Pressure is the test, and tests don't announce themselves. They don't say, this is the moment your future is decided. They arrive disguised as ordinary days, days where no one claps, days where effort goes unseen, days where the reward is invisible. Most men don't fail because they are weak. They fail because they misinterpret the signal. They think resistance means stop, when it actually means prove it. Every system that creates hierarchy works this way. Markets don't reward desire, they reward endurance. Careers don't reward potential, they reward reliability under friction. Power doesn't rise from brilliance. It rises from men who keep moving when the feedback turns cold. This is why two men can start at the same line and end worlds apart. One sees pressure as evidence of injustice. The other sees it as confirmation he's close. One complains, the other recalibrates. One asks, why is this happening to me? The other asks, what is this trying to reveal? And here's the brutal part. The world doesn't need to crush you to eliminate you. It only needs to apply enough discomfort that you remove yourself. That's how most people disappear from competition. They don't lose. They withdraw. Quietly, rationally, with good excuses. Adrian doesn't tell people he quit. He tells them the system is rigged, and maybe parts of it are. But that truth is irrelevant, because even in rigged systems, there are winners, and the difference is not fairness, it's tolerance for pressure. This is where Machiavelli enters the room. He understood something centuries ago that still terrifies people today. Power does not go to the most deserving. It goes to the most adaptive. Morality does not decide outcomes. Interpretation does. Men who rise do not ask if pressure is fair. They ask how to use it. They understand something the majority never will. Hardship is not feedback on your worth. It is feedback on your positioning. And if you misread it, you don't just stay poor in money, you stay poor in leverage, poor in options, poor in authority. Here's the tension. If pressure is the filter, and avoidance is the default response, then what does that say about most people? It means the world doesn't need to stop them. They stop themselves. And once you see that, you can't unsee it. You'll start noticing how quickly men retreat the moment progress becomes unglamorous, how fast they explain away discomfort, how eagerly they outsource responsibility to circumstances, and you'll feel something unsettling. Because the same instinct lives in you. The instinct to step back, to reinterpret resistance as a warning, to call pressure a sign you chose wrong. That instinct is not weakness, it's programming. And in the next part, we're going to expose exactly how that programming is installed, who benefits from it, and why breaking it immediately separates you from 99% of people. But once you see it, there's no going back. There is a moment every man encounters, usually without realizing it, where his future quietly splits in two. No announcement, no drama, just a choice that feels insignificant at the time. This moment is not about courage, it's about interpretation. Let's go back to Adrian. After months of effort with little visible reward, something subtle begins to change in him. Not his circumstances, his story. He starts narrating his life differently. At first, it's harmless. I'm just tired. I need to recharge. I'll come back stronger. Those sentences feel responsible. They sound mature. They earn approval. But beneath them sits a dangerous shift. Adrian is no longer engaging with pressure. He is negotiating with it. And pressure does not negotiate. Here's what most men don't understand. The human mind hates unresolved effort. It hates pouring energy into something that does not immediately respond. So when results lag, the mind looks for relief. And the fastest relief is meaning. If you can explain why something isn't working, you can stop pushing without feeling like you failed. This is where the real sabotage begins. Not with laziness, not with fear, but with interpretation. Adrian begins to believe the system is flawed, that the game is unfair, that the rewards go to the wrong people. Some of that may even be true. But here is the Machiavellian insight. Truth does not decide outcomes. Utility does. A belief can be accurate and still destroy you, because the moment Adrian believes resistance is injustice, something critical breaks. His adaptability. Instead of asking, how do I adjust? He asks, why should I continue? That question feels intelligent, but it's lethal, because power is built by men who don't need moral permission to persist. They don't ask if effort is justified. They ask if effort is effective. This is why Machiavelli warned rulers not about enemies, but about illusions. The illusion that struggle means error. The illusion that difficulty implies misalignment. The illusion that success should feel validating early. These illusions protect the ego. They also guarantee mediocrity. Here's a truth that makes people uncomfortable. Most men don't fail because the pressure is too high. They fail because the pressure is boring. No applause, no milestones, no visible transformation, just repetition, just friction, just days that feel the same. And boredom is far more dangerous than pain. Pain creates urgency. Boredom creates drift. So Adrian drifts. He still talks about ambition, still consumes motivation, still criticizes the system, but his actions lose sharpness. Consistency fades, intensity softens, standards lower quietly. And here's the terrifying part. From the outside, nothing looks wrong. He's functioning, he's busy, he's reasonable. That's how the sorting mechanism works. The world doesn't eliminate men loudly. It lets them rationalize themselves out. Machiavelli understood this pattern deeply. He knew that systems of power do not need to crush most people. They simply wait. Because time favors those who can endure ambiguity, those who can work without reassurance, those who can continue without emotional reward. Pressure is not applied to stop you. It's applied to reveal whether you can operate without validation. And here's the question that should make you uneasy. When pressure enters your life, do you adapt or do you explain? Because explanation feels productive. It feels thoughtful. But adaptation is silent, unglamorous, invisible, and that's why so few choose it. Adrian tells himself he's stepping back temporarily, but the system hears something else. It hears surrender, not dramatic surrender, administrative surrender, the kind where no one notices you're gone until it's too late. This is why Machiavelli said power favors the decisive, not the moral. Decisiveness doesn't mean recklessness. It means movement without emotional consensus. It means acting before certainty, persisting before clarity, continuing before confidence arrives. Most men wait for alignment. Alignment never comes. What comes is momentum, and momentum only visits those already moving. Here's the cliff you're standing on. If pressure is the test, and interpretation determines your response, then the most important skill is not strength, it's perception. In the next part, we're going to expose the exact mental framework that separates men who rise quietly from men who stagnate loudly. You'll see why confidence is not the cause of action, why motivation is irrelevant, and why the men at the top rarely feel ready when they move. Once you understand this, hesitation will start to feel dangerous. There is a myth that keeps men frozen longer than fear ever could. The myth of readiness. Most people believe action follows confidence, that clarity comes before movement, that certainty is a prerequisite for commitment. That belief alone has buried more potential than failure ever did. Here's the reality Machiavelli understood long before modern psychology named it. Confidence is not the fuel. Confidence is the exhaust. It is produced after motion, not before it. But most men wait. They wait to feel prepared. They wait to feel deserving. They wait to feel sure. And while they wait, something else is happening. The environment is adjusting without them. Opportunities don't pause. Markets don't stall. Power structures don't hold seats open. They reorganize around those already in motion. Let's return to Adrian. He doesn't feel ready. He feels uncertain. He feels exposed. So he delays. He tells himself he's gathering information, improving skills, watching patterns. But observation without commitment does something dangerous. It trains the mind to believe safety lies in distance. The longer Adrian watches instead of acts, the more foreign action feels. Action becomes heavy. Risk feels exaggerated. Mistakes feel permanent. And here's the quiet trap. The mind adapts to whatever you repeatedly do. If you repeatedly hesitate, hesitation becomes your strength. You get very good at spotting reasons not to move. Very articulate, very rational. You can explain why now isn't the time better than anyone else. And that skill earns praise. People call you thoughtful, measured, smart, but none of those traits produce power. Machiavelli warned that men who overanalyze lose the moment, not because analysis is wrong, but because timing is unforgiving. Power accumulates to those who act while others are still evaluating. This is where pressure becomes ruthless, because pressure does not care how intelligent your hesitation sounds. It only measures continuation. Here's something uncomfortable. The men you envy are not braver than you. They are less attached to being right. They move before certainty. They accept imperfect positioning. They tolerate embarrassment, not because they enjoy it, but because they understand the alternative. Stagnation. Adrian avoids embarrassment. He avoids visible failure. He avoids committing to a path that might expose him, and in doing so, he guarantees a slower, quieter loss, because while he protects his image, someone else builds leverage, and leverage compounds silently. This is why Machiavelli emphasized momentum over morality. He knew that once motion begins, the rules change. People respond differently to those already advancing. Systems open differently. Resistance reshapes itself. Movement attracts opportunity far more than merit ever does. But the first step is always the hardest because it offers no proof, no validation, no applause, no safety net, just exposure. And exposure feels like danger to the nervous system. So the mind creates stories. I need more time. I need more clarity. I need a better plan. Those sentences feel wise. They are often fatal because here's the hidden truth. The plan improves after contact with reality, not before. Men who wait for the perfect strategy never meet the conditions that refine one. They stay theoretical, and theory never wins against men who are already adjusting in real time. This is the moment where most viewers begin to feel uneasy, because you can feel the pattern, the times you delayed, the times you explained, the times you waited for confidence instead of generating it. And the question forms quietly. If confidence is the result, not the requirement, if momentum creates clarity, not the other way around, then what excuse remains? This is where resistance intensifies, because in the next part, we're going to dismantle the most comforting lie of all, the belief that you are different, that your situation is unique, that your hesitation is justified. And once that illusion collapses, something sharp replaces it. Responsibility. There is one sentence every man tells himself that feels harmless but quietly ruins his future. My situation is different. It sounds reasonable, it sounds personal, it sounds true, and it is the most effective self-deception ever invented, because the moment you believe your hesitation is unique, you exempt yourself from patterns. You stop comparing behaviors. You stop tracking outcomes. You stop asking uncomfortable questions. You become an exception, and exceptions do not learn. Let's be precise. Yes, circumstances differ, backgrounds differ, resources differ, but pressure behaves the same everywhere. Resistance shows up the same way. Doubt speaks the same language. Fear uses the same timing. The man who says, "My case is special," is rarely describing reality. He is protecting identity, because if his struggle is unique, then his lack of movement is justified. And if it's justified, it's no longer dangerous. Machiavelli understood this instinct coldly. He knew men don't resist action because they lack strength. They resist because action threatens the story they tell about themselves. Adrian doesn't want to see himself as afraid, or avoidant, or indecisive, so he reframes. He says he's being careful. He says he's being ethical. He says he's being patient. And again, these words sound virtuous, but virtue that produces no leverage is just decoration. Here is the uncomfortable observation. Every man who rises passes through a phase where he looks foolish, unprepared, underskilled, outmatched. There is no exception. The difference is how long he stays there. Men who stagnate try to avoid that phase entirely. Men who advance accept it as the cost of entry. Adrian wants to skip the awkward stage, the exposed stage, the learning through failure stage. But systems don't allow shortcuts. They allow compression through intensity, or delay through avoidance. That's it. This is why Machiavelli warned rulers against comfort. Comfort creates the illusion of stability while quietly eroding position. The man who waits for conditions to improve rarely notices they are improving for someone else, because momentum reallocates opportunity. And here's where the tension sharpens. Once you recognize that your hesitation is not unique, Once you see that your reasons mirror millions before you, you lose the ability to hide behind them. The excuses stop feeling personal. They start feeling patterned, predictable, and predictable behaviors get predictable results. This is where the internal conflict spikes, because part of you wants relief, and another part knows relief is exactly what keeps you average. Pressure doesn't disappear when you avoid it. It just shifts into a different form. Regret, envy, bitterness. Those are delayed pressures, and they are far harder to adapt to. Machiavelli never promised safety. He promised clarity. He understood that power belongs to men who choose short-term discomfort over long-term humiliation, who endure friction now to avoid irrelevance later. Adrian hasn't failed yet. That's the dangerous part. Failure is loud. It forces change. Stagnation is quiet. It lets you decay slowly while telling yourself nothing is wrong. And that's why so many men wake up one day confused. How did I fall behind? They didn't fall. They stood still while the world sorted. Here's the cliff you're approaching. If your situation isn't unique, if pressure behaves the same for everyone, if hesitation follows the same psychological script, then the difference between the top 1% and the rest is not talent. It's tolerance. Tolerance for uncertainty, tolerance for awkwardness, tolerance for delayed reward. In the next part, we're going to expose the final illusion that keeps men stuck even after they understand all of this. The illusion of motivation. And once that collapses, there will be nothing left to wait for. Motivation is the most celebrated lie in modern success culture. It's sold as the engine, the spark, the missing ingredient. And it is almost completely useless. That statement alone will irritate people who live on inspiration. Good. Because men who rely on motivation never build anything that lasts. Here's why. Motivation is emotional, and emotions are reactive. They rise when things feel promising. They collapse when friction appears. Pressure doesn't respond to emotion, it responds to structure. Machiavelli never told men to feel strong. He taught them to be positioned. Let's look at Adrian again. On good days, he feels motivated. He watches something inspiring. He imagines a different life. Energy spikes. Plans feel exciting. And then nothing happens because motivation doesn't survive contact with resistance. The moment effort becomes dull. The moment feedback turns neutral. The moment results delay. Motivation evaporates. And Adrian tells himself something dangerous. I'll continue when I feel it again. That sentence quietly hands control to circumstance, because now his actions depend on mood, and mood depends on comfort. This is why most men start strong and fade quietly. They mistake emotional readiness for operational readiness. Machiavelli understood that power belongs to men who operate independently of feeling. Not cold men, not heartless men, but disciplined men. Men who act because the action is required, not because it feels rewarding. Here's the uncomfortable truth. The men who get ahead of 99% of people are not more inspired. They are less emotionally involved with their own discomfort. They don't ask, do I feel like doing this? They ask, does this need to be done? And that question changes everything. Adrian feels resistance and interprets it as a lack of motivation. But resistance is not a signal to wait. It is the default state of anything worthwhile. Progress feels heavy because it's carrying you forward. This is where most people get trapped. They keep searching for emotional alignment instead of building behavioral inevitability. They want to feel driven before they move. But the men who rise flip the sequence. They move until drive becomes irrelevant. They build routines that don't ask permission, schedules that don't negotiate, standards that don't depend on mood. This is why discipline feels oppressive to outsiders. It removes excuses, and excuses are the currency of stagnation. Machiavelli warned that men who require emotional justification for action will always be governed by events, because events control emotions, and whoever controls your emotions controls your output. This is the real hierarchy, not money, not status. Control over reaction. Adrian reacts to fatigue, to doubt, to boredom, and reaction makes him predictable. Predictable men are easy to outpace. The men ahead of him are not working harder every day. They are simply not renegotiating their identity every morning. They decided who they are, and then acted accordingly. This is where something shifts for you as the listener, because if motivation is irrelevant, if readiness is a myth, if uniqueness is an illusion, then what remains is terrifyingly simple. Action, unconditional, unromantic, repetitive. The kind of action that doesn't feel like progress until suddenly it is. This is the phase most people never enter, because there is no dopamine here, no praise, no reassurance, just quiet consistency under pressure. And pressure is patient. It waits to see who needs emotional permission to continue. Here's the cliffhanger. If motivation is not the engine, and pressure is not the enemy, then the real advantage lies somewhere else entirely. In the next part, we're going to reveal the single trait that silently separates the top 1% from everyone else. It's not discipline, it's not intelligence, it's not confidence. It's something far less glamorous. And once you recognize it, you'll start seeing why most people never catch up. The trait that separates the top 1% from everyone else is not visible from the outside. It doesn't show up on resumes, it doesn't sound impressive in conversation, and it doesn't feel heroic while you're practicing it. It is tolerance for delayed feedback. Most men cannot endure effort that does not respond. They need signs, signals, evidence that what they're doing is working. And when those signals don't arrive quickly, something inside them begins to erode. Not confidence, commitment. Here is where the sorting becomes merciless, because every meaningful pursuit operates on a delay. Money arrives after competence. Respect arrives after consistency. Authority arrives after proof. But proof only appears after repetition. This gap between effort and response is where most people disappear. Adrian works, he improves, he shows up, but the environment stays quiet. No promotion, no recognition, no breakthrough, and that silence feels personal. It feels like rejection. So he adjusts his behavior to escape the discomfort. He slows down. He diversifies attention. He hedges effort, all reasonable, all fatal, because power rewards men who can function without feedback longer than others. Machiavelli understood this with terrifying clarity. He knew that men who require reassurance are easy to manipulate. Give them praise and they comply. Withhold it and they retreat. But the men who endure silence become uncontrollable. They don't need permission to continue. They move forward while others wait for confirmation. And confirmation always arrives too late to matter. Here's the paradox. By the time results become visible, the advantage is already locked in. When people finally notice success, they assume it came suddenly, overnight. They never see the months or years of silence beforehand. Because silence doesn't trend. It doesn't get shared. It doesn't inspire, but it decides everything. Adrian doesn't lack ability. He lacks tolerance, tolerance for effort without applause, tolerance for work without narrative payoff, tolerance for being invisible while improving. This is why most men chase visibility before leverage. They want to be seen before they are ready. And visibility without leverage invites destruction. Machiavelli warned that premature exposure destroys men, not because they aren't talented, but because they haven't hardened yet. The men who get ahead stay hidden longer. They let skills mature. They let systems compound. They let leverage accumulate quietly. And while others seek validation, they seek position. Here's the moment where this becomes personal. Think about the last time you stopped something, not because you couldn't do it, but because it didn't respond fast enough. The effort felt unanswered. The silence felt humiliating. So you interpreted it as a signal, but it wasn't. It was a test of endurance. And most tests don't explain themselves while they're happening. They reveal their purpose only afterward. This is why the men who rise often seem emotionally flat, not excited, not discouraged, just steady. They don't oscillate with outcomes. They operate on schedule. Pressure doesn't excite them. Silence doesn't scare them. They understand that feedback is a luxury, not a requirement. Adrian waits for feedback to justify continuation. The men ahead of him continue to justify future feedback. That is the inversion, and it's brutal, because once someone passes you by through endurance, catching up becomes exponentially harder. You are no longer racing effort. You are racing compounding advantage. This is the point of no return. Once you understand that delayed feedback is the battlefield, that silence is the price of entry, that invisibility is temporary but leverage is permanent, you can no longer pretend the problem is motivation or fairness or timing. The problem is tolerance, and tolerance is trainable. But training it requires confronting something deeply uncomfortable. In the next part, we're going to expose why most men never develop this tolerance, what psychological pain they are actually avoiding, and why facing it once permanently changes how pressure feels. This is where the separation becomes irreversible. There is a specific kind of pain most men spend their entire lives avoiding. It isn't physical, it isn't dramatic, and it doesn't leave visible scars. It is the pain of being unremarkable while trying. This pain is subtle, quiet, psychological, and it is the real reason most men never develop tolerance for delayed feedback. Because delayed feedback forces you to exist in a dangerous state. A state where effort is real, but identity is uncertain. You are no longer comfortably mediocre, but you are not yet successful. You are exposed. This is the phase Adrian cannot tolerate. When he works hard and nothing changes, something inside him panics, not because he's failing, but because he's unclassified. No clear label, no clear rank, no social proof. Just effort without status, and status deprivation is one of the most powerful psychological stressors known to men. Machiavelli understood this long before psychologists named it. He knew that men fear invisibility more than defeat. Defeat at least gives you a story, an identity, an explanation. Invisibility gives you nothing, no sympathy, no validation, no recognition. Just the quiet question, does any of this matter? Most men escape this pain immediately. They return to environments where their identity is stable, where effort is predictable, where feedback is instant, where they know who they are, even if that identity is small. This is why stagnation feels safer than progress. Progress dissolves certainty before it rebuilds power, and that gap terrifies people. Adrian begins to feel this gap closing in. He's no longer satisfied with where he is, but he's not rewarded for leaving it. So he retreats, not because he lacks discipline, but because he lacks tolerance for ambiguity. Here's the harsh truth. The top 1% live in ambiguity longer than everyone else. They remain unvalidated longer, unrecognized longer, uncomfortable longer, and that endurance becomes their advantage. Because while others flee back to comfort, they stay in the fire. They let the old identity burn away. And this is where the transformation actually happens, not during success, but during obscurity. Machiavelli warned that men who cannot endure uncertainty will always be ruled by those who can, because uncertainty is the price of independence. If you need approval, you will obey. If you need reassurance, you will conform. Only men who can stand alone internally can act freely externally. Adrian wants certainty before commitment. The men ahead of him commit and let certainty catch up later. This is the difference. And once you cross this threshold, once you stop needing to feel like you're winning, you become dangerous, because pressure loses its leverage. Silence loses its power. You no longer interpret lack of response as rejection. You interpret it as normal, expected, temporary. This is why truly powerful men appear calm under conditions that break others. They have already paid the psychological price. They have already survived invisibility. They don't need the world to confirm them anymore. But here's the final twist. Most men never reach this stage, not because it's impossible, but because no one tells them what the pain actually is. They think they're avoiding failure. In reality, they're avoiding ego death, and ego death is the gateway. In the final part, we're going to bring everything together. You'll see exactly how to reposition yourself mentally so pressure stops feeling hostile. Why most people permanently disqualify themselves without realizing it. And how this understanding alone can put you ahead of 99% of people, quietly, permanently. This is where the story resolves. There comes a moment when the pattern finally reveals itself, not intellectually, viscerally. A moment where you realize the world was never against you. It was simply indifferent. And indifference is not cruelty. It is clarity. The world applies pressure because pressure is how order is maintained. Not to punish, not to exclude, but to sort. Once you see this, something fundamental shifts. You stop asking why things are hard. You stop waiting for conditions to improve. You stop needing reassurance to continue because you understand the mechanism. Pressure is not a verdict. It is a measurement. Silence is not rejection. It is the space where leverage forms. Delay is not denial. It is the cost of compounding. This is what puts you ahead of 99% of people. Not motivation, not confidence, not brilliance. Interpretation. Most men interpret resistance as a signal to stop. You now see it as a signal to refine. Most men interpret invisibility as failure. You recognize it as incubation. Most men interpret discomfort as misalignment. You understand it as initiation. This is the Machiavellian advantage. Machiavelli never told men to fight the system emotionally. He told them to understand it structurally, to see power as a function of positioning, not fairness, to see outcomes as the result of endurance, not entitlement. Adrian reaches this realization too late. He looks back and sees the moments he stepped away, the days he softened effort, the times he waited for permission that never came. Nothing dramatic stopped him. He simply disqualified himself quietly. And that's the final lesson. Most people are not held back. They opt out. They misread pressure. They negotiate with discomfort. They retreat into explanations, and the system lets them. It does not chase them, it does not argue, it moves on. But now, you know that progress feels empty before it feels rewarding. You know that clarity follows motion. You know that silence is not a signal to quit. This knowledge does something dangerous. It removes your excuses, and with them, your alibi. Because once you understand the mechanism, you can no longer blame the environment. You either adapt, or you choose stagnation consciously. There is no middle ground. This is why the men who rise rarely announce it. They don't need to. Their behavior has already separated them. While others wait to feel ready, they move. While others seek validation, they compound. While others explain, they endure. And eventually, without warning, the silence breaks. Leverage appears. Momentum accelerates. The same people who ignored you begin to ask questions, not because you changed who you are, but because you outlasted the filter. That is how power actually forms, quietly, relentlessly, indifferently. The world did not need to reward you early. It only needed to see if you would continue. And now the final question is not philosophical. It's operational. Will you interpret pressure the way 99% of people do? Or will you use it the way the top 1% always have? Because from this point forward, every moment of resistance is no longer a mystery. It's an invitation. Disclaimer: this video was created with the assistance of artificial intelligence, AI. AI tools were used for script writing, voice generation, and slash or visual elements to enhance storytelling, clarity, and production quality. All ideas, themes, and editorial direction are original and curated for educational and motivational purposes. This content does not represent real persons, events, or financial advice. Viewer discretion and independent judgment are advised.